Hey everybody, and welcome to the YouTube video. In this YouTube video, we are going to be going over Critical Role's new game system called Candela Obscura, a horror mystery kind of genre system that is more focused on character progression and story rather than magic items, dungeons, dragons, and all the other stuff that those high fantasy systems take care of, such as D&D and Pathfinder. So in this video, I'm going to be going over my thoughts and opinions as a player and a GM on playing a system like this, since I've never really played a D6 pool system before, let alone a horror and mystery kind of focused tabletop RPG system. And if you're in the same boat as me, then feel free to leave a comment in the section down below, the comment section down below, with what you think about some of the points I bring up in this video. And also be sure to leave a like if you liked, and a thumbs down, I guess, if you don't. But even still, let's get right into the thick of things. And for full transparency, this won't be a how-to video. If you want that video, go check out Critical Role's YouTube channel. They have a fantastic video going over all the rules for Candela Obscura. But in this video, we're more so going to be going over the quick start guide and a D&D addict's first reaction to playing a new D6 pool system kind of video, if that makes any sense at all. So be sure to go check out that video. And if you want the quick start guide, I'll be sure to leave a link down below for where you can grab it for free, which is pretty cool. Alright, so starting off with perhaps the biggest thing that differentiates Candela Obscura from other TTRPG systems such as 5e and Pathfinder is that there are no D20s. I know, crazy stuff. They're really starting off strong with the horror theme here. For all of us, at least D&D and Pathfinder nerds out here who are so used to using D20s. But don't worry about that, because the D6 system is actually pretty cool, and I'll be sure to show you why coming up. But anyways, as opposed to other systems that may use a D20 system to determine whether or not you succeed or fail at things by using things like ability scores and modifiers and skills and all that kind of stuff, in this particular system, this Illuminated Worlds D6 pool system, it means that there are degrees of success based on your highest roll from a pool of D6. I've seen quite a few people online saying that this is a similar system to Blades in the Dark and a few other D6 pool games from what I understand, but since I haven't played Blades in the Dark, or any other D6 pool game for that matter, I wouldn't really know the difference, frankly. But I do want to say that if a giant in the tabletop role-playing community, such as Critical Role, is adopting this new system into potentially one of their next big streaming shows, then most likely it will lead not only for people to become invested into tabletop games such as Candela Obscura, but other tabletop systems such as Blades in the Dark. So if anything, I think it's a win-win scenario for all D6 pool systems. And also, I don't even think you can copyright game rules anyways, so I don't see why some people might be getting upset over Critical Role adopting some of these rules into this system. So from what I can tell, all of the rules for this new game system are relatively short in terms of the amount that there are, I should say, because pretty much all of the rules can fit into the first 9 pages of the quick start guide, which is, wow, that's actually amazing, because I was really worried because I wanted to learn the system, and obviously coming over from a D20 system to a D6 system, I was worried that there was going to be tons of new rules and changes, but honestly, there's not a whole lot, and a lot of it is pretty simple and easy to understand. So I would recommend that if you are also worried about trying out a new system and transitioning from a D20 system, then go ahead and try it. It's actually pretty user-friendly and isn't very complicated. But anyways, players are supposed to read up to page 16. Meanwhile, game masters are of course meant to read the entire book and the example adventure, which will take a look at the plot hook at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. Since Candela Obscura is a role-playing and story-focused system, I am super happy that they have put in tools that the players can use to not only help themselves, but their fellow party members succeed or survive. These tools include things such as Drive, Gilded, and Resistance, which allow you to modify your luck by adding the amount of dice you use to roll to determine an outcome for something, or allow you to re-roll your dice depending upon if a situation calls for it and you really want to succeed at something. For example, on your character sheet you have these little dots which represent your resistances, which if you're familiar with D&D, does not mean that you take half damage from something, but instead means that you get to re-roll some dice if you don't like the outcome. I don't know why, but I was expecting a lot more rules. But there will probably be more rules that are released when the official books are released, which I think they're coming out later this year. But you can definitely see that when you look at some of these pre-generated characters, there is some features that are most likely still being workshopped or either just fine-tuned, I should say. But in the first 9 pages of this quick start guide, it goes over everything from dice mechanics to new action systems to combat, and initially, it took me a little bit to get used to the character sheet. When I first took a look at the sheet, I was a bit surprised with how simple it looked. I mean, if you look at it initially compared to a D&D or Pathfinder character sheet, there isn't as much stuff on it. Not to mention, it's just one page. So, looking at the left side of your character sheet, you have your drives, which are nerve, cunning, and intuition, which are kind of like your ability scores from D&D as far as I can tell. And your actions are underneath those, such as move, sway, or survey, which are kind of like your skills. Something I immediately noticed when I was looking at the character sheet was that there's no place for you to put your backstory, alignment, or anything else like that, including your equipment. And instead you have things like circle, style, catalyst, question, and gear. And from what I understand, circle is which Candela Obscura group you belong to, style is your character's style, so pretty self-explanatory, catalyst is the event that drove your character to join Candela Obscura, and question is what question you're trying to answer. And I assume this question could be the same between all players depending upon the adventure, like, what caused this woman to melt, or why did this person suddenly burst into flames, or things like that. The other thing I noticed was that there isn't, like, classes in this system. Instead, they are essentially your role, which is kind of like your class, and your specialty, which is equivalent to your subclass, I guess. So in this pre-made example, your role is muscle, and it has your little special ability right down there, and then your specialty is Explorer, which has some more special features right here. And from what I understand, when you create a character, you choose one of each of these abilities, and then as you level up, you gain more of them, or can gain more of them, I should say. So all in all, pretty simple stuff. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm really interested to see all of the new features and abilities that you'll be able to choose via character creation or character progression once the full book comes out, because as you can tell here, sadly not all of them are released quite yet, but it's still exciting to know that there are going to be more of these options that you can choose from rather than just the ones that are in the quick start guide, and how you can enhance the game via your particular character's progression and what particular features you might choose. And finally, the last thing I noticed was illumination and illumination keys, which is at the bottom of your character sheet, which is essentially, from what I can tell, your experience and your experience points. Illumination keys act kind of like your character's goal and help add to your character's backstory. So with this pre-made character sheet as an example, your goals would be to study an artifact, discuss history, or run into danger. So you can see that some of those might be a little bit easier to do during a session than others. These keys play into your character advancing, which is determined by looking at your party's circle sheet, which is basically a shared advancement/XP pool, which is super interesting for my opinion, because I haven't played a system yet that has a shared character sheet that you can use to boost everyone in your group. And now you may be asking yourself, well, how do I level up? Well, you and your party are asked these questions by your GM at the end of a session. And for every yes that you answer, you get to fill in a little dot on this cool little candle circle thing, and then you get to add even more dots if you and your party members have completed some of your illumination keys. So you can see that leveling up actually goes relatively quickly, as opposed to in D&D or Pathfinder where you may be using XP or milestone, and that requires obviously you to complete certain tasks to get that XP. Meanwhile in Candela Obscura, as long as you complete your illumination keys, you get a full XP point essentially, which you can then contribute with the rest of your friends to level up your entire group once you complete the little circle doohickey thingy. But anyways, as you progress through that little circle thing, and eventually you're able to complete some of those dots and get up to those bolded dots, each time you reach those, which are considered or called milestones, you get to choose 2 of these advancements that are below it. And if your party completes the whole circle, your party gets to choose 1 new circle ability that is shared between everyone, kind of going to what I was saying before about essentially everyone gets a level up if they complete the entire circle, which is awesome. I think this system of leveling up is ingenious for a system like Candela Obscura, because it drives the players to accomplish as many of their illumination keys as possible during one session. And it's not a broken system because Candela Obscura campaigns are only meant to last a couple of sessions anyways. And from what I can tell, combat is also based around the section that's right above this one, which is role and consequences. And it talks about how the game is focused around your character going through the story and rolling to determine successes or failures, even in combat, as opposed to other systems where a large portion of the rules and systems and mechanics that are in place are based around actions that you can take during combat. An example being with Pathfinder, where a large portion of the rules are based around what you can do during combat. Then after combat, it goes into relationships and mentions that there will be like a reputation kind of system that will be, of course, included in the full release, which I think is pretty cool because I personally love a well-made reputation system because it rewards players for role-playing, which is definitely the main focus of this system, so I imagine that that system for reputation or whatever is going to be really well made, and I'm really excited to see how that incorporates with all the abilities and features that you can choose during character creation. And then after that, it talks about gear, and which is selected during an assignment. And so I think this means that you get to choose your equipment from the gear section that's on your character sheet whenever you want to during a session. But according to this, you can only choose 3 of them during a session or an assignment. So it looks like there's still some strategy that goes into choosing your gear, which is interesting, because when I initially saw this, I thought that it was just you just get all of your gear straight off the get-go, and I thought to myself, well then what's the purpose in you selecting them if you can have all of them, you know what I mean? So I'm glad that they included it where you can only have 3 per assignment, which I think means per session, which makes sense, so that way you have to kind of pick and choose what equipment you use during that session, and sometimes some equipment might pertain to a situation better than others. And something else I noticed was that there's no place on the character sheet for your HP or constitution or armor class or anything like that. I guess you just can't have armor, or maybe you can, but at least from what I can tell, that doesn't seem to be a mechanic yet. But anyways, towards the top right of the character sheet, you'll notice that there is body, brain, and bleed, which are essentially your HP or your ways you can take damage, I should say. And according to this, you take damage when attacked by some sort of an effect, whether it be a monster, a psychic assault, or something to that effect. Then, if you have to scribble down a 4th mark but can't, you become incapacitated and then choose a scar, like some of the examples from this list. And then remove a point from an action of your choice and add a point into a different action. And then, of course, if you knock down a 4th point, you become incapacitated until your party gets you somewhere safe. And it doesn't necessarily specify what somewhere safe means, but I would hope that would just mean like back to your base of operations or your hideout or something like that. I don't think like you could just run down a hallway and hide in a closet or whatever and be like, okay, this is safe. The monster can't get me in here or something like that. You know what I mean? But going back to the scar thing, I actually really like the scar system because I think this is a fantastic way to enrich and drive roleplay in your particular game. And the paragraphs after this one go into helping to explain how to roleplay these scars and give wonderful examples. But they also are pretty cool because they give in-game mechanical changes for how your character interacts with the world around them and role-playing with the other players at the table. But now you may be asking yourself, well, okay, now we know how we take damage and how combat works, kind of, and how all that stuff interacts with one another, but how do we heal? Because there's no magic items, so there's no health potions or healer's tools or spells, right? Well, the answer lies on your circle sheet, which is the thing we kind of covered before with that little candle, circle, milestone progression thing. From what I understand, this section right here shows your circle's resources, and you can use those resources to heal yourself or stitch, regain your drives and resistances or refresh, or gain some extra dice, train, if a particular session didn't include tons of action and you need to heal or recover any sort of resources that you've used in that session. So at first glance, I really love how the system is so story-focused and character-focused. It feels like there are a lot of safeguards for poor luck, when in other systems, poor luck means your character doesn't succeed at very much for that session, or could even die. And I know that there are things in other systems like GM Inspiration in 5e or Hero Points in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but for those systems, they're very small resources compared to all of the different things that you can use in Candela Obscura to improve your luck or help your friends. So maybe you guys can relate to this experience, but with some of my experiences with running story-based D&D or Pathfinder games, it can feel pretty bad when there is one player that has a really unlucky session. They aren't landing attack rolls, they're failing on saving throws, and they're completely failing on ability checks, despite their character being this super badass hero that is meant to succeed at those things. And yes, there are mechanics in some systems to account for that, to re-roll, but a lot of them sadly don't account for a very bad session where you're constantly rolling terribly. Meanwhile, in Candela Obscura, there are tons of different mechanics and resources that you can use to improve your luck, so that way your character can continue to progress through the story without having to rely on just your straight stats and your skill bonuses or anything else like that. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, doesn't that take away from the story if you have all of these safeguards and things like that to take away from the experience? Because the whole point of the experience is obviously that there is a risk to it, right? If you're doing this adventure, there is no guarantee that you will succeed. However, I don't think that Candela Obscura's system will take away from that, because with all of these systems that are in place, with all of the resources and things like that, in some cases, if you run out of those resources, you're just out until either the session ends, and if all of you in the party run out of resources, then you might have a very bad next session. So you always have to be cautious on what resources you use in the session, and also strategically think ahead for what resources you can replenish and how you can help your friends by using some of the resources and the features that you have, which I think adds a lot more depth to the gameplay than I initially thought. Because when I first saw this being announced and I saw it was going to be a story-based system, I thought to myself, well, if there's not going to be very much combat, then what's the point in you just playing the game when you can just essentially sit around a table and play improv with your friends? You know what I mean? And something else I just thought of was it would be super cool if Critical Role or Guaranteed Press or whoever really controls Candela Obscura, I guess, would transition it to a VTT, specifically Alchemy VTT. Because if they did that, Alchemy is specifically directed towards creating extremely immersive experiences through storytelling RPG systems. And they are importing other games like Pathfinder that aren't necessarily directed towards that, but with how immersive and story-based Candela Obscura is, I think it would be perfect for Alchemy VTT. And unless you're like Critical Role and can afford this massive set complete with sound effects, speakers, and fog machines and all this other stuff to, make this fully immersive experience, sadly, the rest of us are just gonna have to do things most likely online. And I think that doing it through Alchemy would improve the experience drastically, because Alchemy already has a ton of really awesome features in their shop where you can go and purchase sound effects or different kinds of things. Obviously, it's a little bare bone right now, but they're working on importing all of those things because they recently just finished their Kickstarter. But now it's time to read to you the example plot hook or premise for the example assignment given to you in the Quick Start Guide for Candela Obscura. At the New Fair World exhibition, a woman models a stunning dress made of a color the world has never seen. During the presentation, she lets out an ear-piercing scream and collapses into a pile of glowing bones and viscera. Candela Obscura learns of this strange incident and sends its agents to investigate what happened to her. But this is the end of the video, so thank you so much for watching, and if you would like to, please leave a like down below or a comment telling me what you liked about Candela Obscura from this video, or what you like about the Critical Role show for Candela Obscura, or perhaps other D6 systems, because now that I've learned that the D6 system is pretty cool, I'm interested in trying other ones, so which ones would you recommend and why? But anyways, this is the end of the video, so I will see you guys next time. Take it easy. Bye-bye.